This is Steve Zeltzer with KPFA WorkWeek Radio, and I'm with Fabio Bosco. He is a trade unionist. He's a member of the Sao Paulo Transit Workers Union, and he's an activist in the union. In fact, he's recently reinstated after being fired, along with 39 other transit workers. He's also an activist, labor activist, and involved in Conlutas, which is an independent trade union federation in Brazil. And we're speaking now a day after the election in Brazil of a right-wing presidential candidate. So welcome to WorkWeek Radio, Fabio.
Thank you, Steve. It's a pleasure to talk to you.
So, Fabio, why don't you talk about the political, economic situation in Brazil and what has happened in the past 6 months with the development of this right-wing neo-fascist candidate who now is the president of Brazil?
You see, Steve, what happened in Brazil is that we have been under a very deep economic crisis in the last 30 years. And there is a lot of dissatisfaction among the working class. The working class is very angry. And so in these elections, what happened is that this far right-wing candidate, Jair Bolsonaro, he managed to bring part of this voting from the working class. And why? It's not because the working class wants a law and order candidate or they want a dictatorship or they want to oppose women's rights, LGBT rights, or they are racist. That's not the point. The majority of the people who voted for Jair Bolsonaro, in reality, they do not support their ideas, but they are opposed to his opponent, Fernando Haddad from the Workers' Party, who is a kind of center-left candidate. He is understood by the working class as one of the responsible for this huge economic crisis and this difficult situation now. And that's why they voted against Haddad for Jair Bolsonaro.
Now, I was in Brazil a couple of years ago, and there was a strike of the oil workers, Petrobras, in Brazil. And during that strike, I interviewed the workers, and they said that the corruption, the systemic corruption and privatization of Petrobras was actually taking place by the Workers' Party government. Why don't you talk about the real role of the Workers' Party and the social democracy and why workers were very angry and rejected the Social Democratic Workers' Party?
You see, Steve, the Workers' Party, when they were elected, everyone, the working class, expected them to meet their demands, to improve employment, wages, public education, public health care, and not to be engaged in corruption. But after 13 years in power, what happened is that the Workers' Party, they managed to rule the country in the benefit of big business, mainly the banking sector, the agribusiness sector, the big car assemblers, and also building industry. These four sectors were the main benefactors of the Workers' Party administration. And so when there was economic growth, it was possible for the working class to have some small benefits, like the family allowance, which is it's a kind of food stamps that you have there in the US. It's important for the working class to have it, but it was a small gain. Also, the minimum wage, it improved to a certain extent. But this happened when there was economic growth. But when the economic crisis came, all the burden of the economic crisis was put on the backs of the working class. And so these gains were, let's say, made empty of real content. And the main benefactors, the banks, the big business here in Brazil, well, they were the ones that were making money even under this deep economic crisis. And the working class was looking at that. And on top of that, a lot of corruption charges against leaders of the Workers' Party. So they got very dissatisfied. That's the let's say, the background of the situation that we are living now in Brazil.
And the idea of social democracy and the Workers' Party, the Lula government, was a social democratic government. Why is that idea come to looks like bankruptcy, that political ideology of social democracy? Why has that gone bankrupt and led to a right-wing government in Brazil?
Well, this government is not does not split with the capitalist structure of the country, and it also does not change some very big issues we have in Brazil. For instance, in Brazil every year 60,000 people are killed. 70% of them are black young men that lives in the poor areas in the big cities. In 13 years of working class, nothing was done. Incarceration doubled under Lula administration. The legalization of abortion did not come because of the alliances of this government with the religious sector inside parliament. So what I can tell you, the change between a right-wing government and this left-wing government for the working class was very small. Now, what happens with Jair Bolsonaro? Jair Bolsonaro, on top of having the same economic policies that are IMF inspired, so he has the same economic policies of the Workers' Party, but he has something else that is very problematic. He wants to bring back the ideas of the military dictatorship that we had in Brazil for 20 years, starting in 1964. So that's very problematic because it means that he wants to strike the unions, any dissent in the country. So that's very dangerous, very dangerous. Even so, the working class, when they vote for this far right-wing candidate, they are not voting for him because they want to bring back the dictatorship. They are voting for him because they want to punish the Workers' Party candidate. That's the reality we can see here now.
Now, there's been a rise of fascism, neo-Nazism, nationally and internationally. There was a massacre in a synagogue. There are attacks, murders of African Americans. The Mercer family in the United States has set up Turning Point USA. They're targeting professors, Muslim or Palestinian, and professors who are critical of capitalism, critical of U.S. economic and imperial policy. I understand Bannon went to Brazil and met with the president, and also the capitalists in Brazil have been supporting this right-wing candidate. Can you talk about the role of the Nazis, neo-Nazis nationally and in Brazil?
Well, that's the same reality we have here. The fact that Jair Bolsonaro was elected boasts all these extreme right-wing groups across the country. But it's important to remember that these groups are a small minority, and it's not clear if Jair Bolsonaro and these groups will manage to achieve a change in the civil liberties in the freedom in the country. It's not clear. I believe the working class will fight to keep any small freedom that we have in Brazil now. So any attack against democratic rights will face resistance from the working class and also from democratic sectors that are strong here in Brazil. Recently, the polls showed that 69% of the Brazilians do not want a dictatorship back to Brazil. So I believe that despite of the fact that the election of Jair Bolsonaro helped these far right-wing groups to take action, I believe that the resistance of the working class will be strong. And so it's not clear what will prevail. I hope what will prevail is the working class and the struggle for the workers' rights, including the free democratic rights. But it's not clear now. We have to see the development of the events in the coming months.
Well, the Workers' Party in Brazil is probably the leadership that has majority of the leadership of the unions in Brazil, of the Trade Union Federation in Brazil. It's a supporter of the Workers' Party. What role have they played in opposing or supporting privatization, supporting the policies of the Workers' Party? And what is going to happen to these workers in these unions that are led by supporters of the Workers' Party?
Well, the Workers' Party leads the largest labor federation in Brazil. And these labor federations put together many of the main unions in Brazil. So they are, in reality, still the main leaders of the working class in Brazil. When the Workers' Party was in power, what happened with this labor federation is that they were not opposing the policies that were coming from Lula administration, from Dilma administration. On the opposite, they were helping them to move forward. And that was very, very problematic. Now, with Jair Bolsonaro, it's not clear what they will do, because they still believe in partnership between labor and capital. And so they stand for compromising with the bosses, and in moments of economic downturn, they can agree with concessions by the working class. So it's a very problematic leadership. But I believe that the working class, as soon as it moves forward, they will overcome this kind of leadership that is very problematic for the future of the workers here in Brazil and worldwide.
Well, when Lula was removed, what do you think about his removal? And also the role of the unions in believing that the elections are going to solve the problem of this social crisis, of this crisis of capitalism and imperialism. Are workers now questioning that strategy, that the elections can solve the problem in Brazil, or for that matter in the United States?
Definitely. The working class is not looking for the elections as a solution for their daily problems. That's really happening in Brazil now. And what I can say, this democratic regime, democratic bourgeois regime, has not the same support it used to have in the past. And when Lula, in reality, he managed to be elected and re-elected. And then he elected President Dilma Rousseff. Dilma Rousseff was suffered impeachment. And what happened with the working class at that point? The majority of the working class were supporting her impeachment because they were suffering the difficulties of the economic crisis, and they were very dissatisfied with the corruption that was all around the Workers' Party administration. So they supported it. It was But the vice president of Brazil, now President Michel Temer, he carried out the same kind of reforms against the working class that the previous administration was doing. And so, in some way, Michel Temer helped the Workers' Party to get some momentum. And Lula was, despite of the fact he was in jail, he was once again popular because the working people was looking to the past, and the last president that they remember that the situation was not so bad was Lula. But since he could not be the candidate, then another change in the consciousness, and the working class decided to punish the Workers' Party. That's what's really happened.
And if this government supports fascist gangs, if there's an increase of attacks on minorities, Brazilian Africans, gays and lesbians, I mean, it seems that he's inciting and wants to incite fascistic attacks like Trump is doing against different communities. What and how should the working class, the unions, organize to defend itself against these kinds of assaults?
I believe, Steve, that there will be an increase of self-defense groups among all sections of the oppressed people and the working class. Because what happened, as soon as these fascist groups start to take action, the people start to organize themselves to fight back. So I believe that self-defense will be more and more in the agenda of the working class and oppressed people. And I can tell you, these fascist groups will not have an easy time here in Brazil because people are angry. And this anger, I believe, will move from the Workers' Party towards this new administration and all these extreme right-wing groups that are feeling comfortable to take action now. So I believe that self-defense will be on the agenda, and it will be possible to fight back these groups one by one.
Now, you're in a federation called Conlutas, which organizes independently trade unions, women's groups, Brazilian Africans, and other minorities in this federation. The perspective of this group is towards building united front perspective, uniting the working class. Why don't you talk about the relevance of that strategy of united front movements in this growing class contradiction, class attacks, both in Brazil and the United States and internationally?
Well, the United Front is a necessity for the working class to fight back in better conditions to win. So it's true, my labor federation is standing for a united front to defend all labor rights which are under attack and will be under attack. Recently, the 8 labor federations in Brazil, they met and they have a statement saying that whoever is elected for the presidency of Brazil, the labor movement will take action against the reform in the pension system that both candidates were proposing and any other reforms that are carried out in order to take labor rights. So we believe that that's a necessity. And you see, Steve, these labor federations, the majority of them support the idea of partnership with the bosses. But despite of that, they agree to make this statement and build this movement because there is a lot of pressure among the rank and file to defend their rights. People in Brazil today, they don't want to lose anything more. They have lost a lot with the inflation in terms of jobs, all related to the economic crisis. but they don't want to lose more. And so this pressure is very present. And this put pressures on the labor leaders to unite, to fight back, to preserve each one of the rights we have today.
Well, the issue of privatization, Petrobras, privatization of the transit system, your union has been involved fighting privatization, and you've now become partially privatized. This is a global issue. In the United States, privatization of education charters, privatization of public services, it's used by the capitalists to increase their profits and to destroy organized labor. Why don't you talk about how privatization has affected the working class in Brazil and how this united front may be a vehicle to unite the entire working class against privatization?
Yes, Steve, privatization today in Brazil is and will be a big issue for the working class. It's true that here in Brazil they are doing the privatization by other names, like partnership between the private sector and the public sector, PPP, concessions. They change the names, but it's real privatization. All governments in Brazil, both the national government and state governments and municipal governments, all of them are committed to carry out privatization. They say that that's the solution for Brazil to overcome the economic crisis that we have been living for the last 3 years. And but what we know is that the privatization does not come in the benefit of the working class. They come to benefit the big business who take these public services to make a lot of money. So in general, what happened when they privatize any service here in Brazil, what you have is that the price of that services increases, but the quality goes down. And so that's why the majority of the working people in Brazil, they oppose privatization. They don't believe privatization will be a solution for anything. But the IMF, the World Bank policies inspire all these capitalist governments here in Brazil to carry out this privatization. So what I can tell you is that there will be a resistance. There will be strikes against privatization, and whether we will win or not, it's not clear. But I'm sure the working class will take the streets, will go on strike to prevent each privatization each government tries to carry out here in Brazil.
Now, you say that the union, some of the union leaders now are for joining together against these attacks. The struggle for a general strike, a national general strike in Brazil against the attacks, do you foresee that happening against the frontal attack on the working class?
Yes, I think we will see new general strikes in Brazil. We had a very strong one last year that maybe was the strongest one in Brazilian history. And I believe that the necessity for the general strike will be there once again. And I believe the labor movement will take this action in order to stop the reforms the new president, the new administration will try to carry out.
Now, what has been the role of United States U.S. imperialism in supporting this right-wing government? I know when Dilma was interviewed in the United States, she said that there was no role of the United States in Brazil. What is the role of the United States in Brazil?
Look, Steve, 40% of Brazilian economy is under control of multinationals. The majority of them are American multinationals. So American imperialism have an upper hand here in Brazil, not only in terms of the economy, but also they put a lot of pressure for their interests. So every government has strong links with the United States, and the new president Jair Bolsonaro announced that his priorities are the relations with America, with the United States, with Europe, and he's a Zionist, so he wants to have a special Israel. So what I can tell you is that the U.S. has ever been very influential in Brazil, and they are still very influential. So I think that our former President Dilma, when she says that the U.S. has no role here in Brazil, I think that it's not a proper understanding of what's happening here.
Now, the reports have been the technology, WhatsApp, that application, WhatsApp, that millions and millions of Brazilian use, was used by the right wing, and that corporations, the capitalist class in Brazil, were providing a large amount of money to this right-wing candidate and moving towards supporting fascism, the right-wing capitalists in Brazil. Is that the case? Are the capitalists in Brazil more and more moving towards supporting a fascist solution to the economic crisis and to crush the working class?
Yes, Steve, that's precisely what happened here. And it's interesting that one mainstream media here in Brazil, they make a probing on that, and they brought to the headlines the fact that some big businessmen, they were paying some private companies that are specialized in sending messages through WhatsApp, but millions of messages for a lot of money. It's a lot of money. They put a lot of money in the campaign to support Jair Bolsonaro. That, in terms of the Brazilian constitution, that's illegal money. That's illegal funding. So there is a lot of debate around that here. All these businessmen are saying that they did not put any money, they did not do that. But as I told you, all the media here in Brazil, they publicize this fact that Jair Bolsonaro, who says that he has little time in the public television to talk to the people, he has small resources because it's a small party. In reality, all his election campaign was strongly supported by this illegal funding coming from some big businessmen.
And the use of media by the workers' movement, by the trade unions, how is technology, communication technology, social media being used by the workers' movement in Brazil?
Well, the workers' movement is increasingly resorting for social media. As far it's not possible to have regular access to the mainstream media, the social media is the way that unions, left-wing organizations, people's organizations, they are resorting to in order to talk to a broader audience. But even there, Steve, what I can tell you is that the right-wing candidate here in Brazil, he is trying to occupy, to take over the social media in the benefit of his policies. But even so, the workers' movement, they are increasingly benefiting from the social media.
And the unions in media in Brazil, are journalists under attack in Brazil? Is there an attempt to crush democratic journalism and communication in Brazil?
Yes, it's starting, and the main one was exactly this journalist that brought this probing about the illegal funding for Jair Bolsonaro campaign that went to what some companies that deals with WhatsApp. This woman, she's a woman. She has been strongly attacked in social media, threats, life threats to her. So I believe this issue of of the both independent media and mainstream media will be under attack here in Brazil by this new administration.
And WhatsApp, of course, is owned by Facebook. It's a subsidiary of Facebook. What role does Facebook play in Brazil?
Facebook's very important here. And it was very influential in the elections as well. The administration of Facebook did not take any stand to stop all these fake news that were arranged in order to support this far right-wing candidate. So what I can tell you is that many people, the majority of the Brazilians, they have access to social media, and this social media did not have any interest in preventing all this fake news that helped to gaffer, to transform this anger of the working class against the regime, against the mainstream parties. So all this fake news helped to put together this anger in the benefit of Jair Bolsonaro. But, of course, it was not these fake news by themselves cannot do all this work. They must operate on a background of economic crisis, dissatisfaction, so that they can be very useful for this right-wing politics. If we don't have this background, of course, these fake news are not strong enough by themselves to change the situation of one election or any social situation here in Brazil.
But you are saying that Facebook, which is owned by Mark Zuckerberg, and is engaged in censoring in the United States, heavily censoring, banning pages, even pages critical of President Trump, has actually been benefiting from the fake news in Brazil in this recent election. Financially, they've been benefiting.
Yes, I think they are. Look, here, when this denouncing of WhatsApp companies operating WhatsApp in the benefit of Jair Bolsonaro happened, WhatsApp managers, they said, okay, we are stopping some of these centers that are sending millions of messages with fake news. Yes, they did something, but I can tell you, I am in many WhatsApp groups, and this was of little effect. All this fake news are coming till now. So I think that they did not do anything really to prevent that. And this is on the benefit of who has more money and all of this. At the same time, we have seen Brazil in the last years, for instance, censorship against people that opposes Zionism. So some people, they have their pages in Facebook blocked. It's a censorship that is being carried out about this, but it's not so broad up to now. We have to see how these things develop here.
And of course, the Zionists, the U.S. government, have said that if you're opposed to Israel, you're anti-Semitic. And that is the position of Israel. If you're against Israel, if you're critical of Israel, you're an anti-Semite. So this is the ideology that Facebook and the U.S. government is using, and they're trying to pass laws in the United States to prevent even calling for a boycott of Israel because of its policies. Is that the same that's taking place in Brazil?
Let me tell you, yes, it's the same, but up to now, the Zionists did not have the necessary strength to pass any bill in parliament to prevent the campaign of BDS here in Brazil, which is developing a lot. It's recently Roger Waters was here in Brazil. He made shows everywhere. He talked about this issue of boycotting the state of Israel. So up to now, there are efforts by the Zionists in order to forbid any kind of BDS activity here, but they did not succeed. So we are still working on that.
And of course, the Zionists in Israel have been supporting Trump and supporting his racist policies against immigrants, attacking minorities, and also now, which has led to an attack on Jews and a rise in anti-Semitism by right-wing forces. And of course, Israel says that the solution is people should just go to Israel, I guess. That's the Zionist solution.
Yes, yes. Well, that happens here in the same fashion. But the point is that the majority of the Jewish community here, they don't want to live in Israel. So they don't move. There is a lot of exchange, but I don't see any section of the Jewish community here, something significant, you see, trying to go into Israel to live in Israel. On the opposite, what I see is people trying to leave Israel in order to go to Europe or America, where there are, I think it's a safer condition for the Jewish community to live, because in Israel, the Zionists, as far as they resort to apartheid policies against the Palestinians, everyone that's there knows that sometime things will change completely. And I believe the majority of the people there don't want to see the hell their situation will become when the Palestinians manage to have stronger actions against Zionism.
And the development of internationalism in the working class, unity between workers around the world, is a obviously important issue. The global economy requires workers to fight on a global level. How is the Brazilian working class working to develop internationalism and linking up the Brazilian workers with workers in Japan, Korea, the United States, all over the world? And is there any efforts towards that end?
Yes, I agree with you, Steve. The international solidarity among the workers is a necessity to fight back. It's a necessity. What happened? Different sectors of the labor movement here, they do different things. You see, the main labor federations, they are linked to ICTU. Others are with the World Federation. And we, CSP Conlutas, we put our efforts in the International Labor Network of Solidarity and Struggle together with our sisters and brothers in France, Spain, and some other countries, because we believe that it's important to build international solidarity, but at the same time being 100% independent from the bosses and from the government. And so we all also put our efforts to develop international solidarity. And I believe that more and more it will be a necessity. It will be carried out by the working class worldwide.
So I want to thank you very much for joining us. We've been talking with Fabio Bosco from Sao Paulo, Brazil. He's a transit worker, an activist in the union, the Sao Paulo Transit Workers Union, and also Conlutas. And he's been talking with us about the recent election in Brazil of a right-wing government and what that means for the working class, the people of Brazil, and the trade unions. So thank you for joining us on WorkWeek Radio.
Thank you, Steve.